Well, we've reached the end of the 2012 NFL regular season. Had a busy day today, 16 games on this week 17 Sunday. It was really a sickening end to the day for me and anybody else who was on Dallas plus 3.5. Biggest game of the day, of course, was Dallas at Washington, the Sunday night game. It was effectively a playoff game. The winner wins the NFC East. The loser misses the playoffs entirely. Washington was a 3.5-point favorite. Redskins ended up winning by 10, 28-18. Now, if you didn't see the game, if you're just waking up in the morning and seeing the score, well, better yet, if you're a Dallas bettor, if you were on Dallas plus 3.5 and you're just waking up and seeing the score, you're lucky, okay? You saved yourself some pain and anguish because the Cowboys were down 3 points with less than 3 minutes left with the ball and a first down when Tony Romo threw as bad of an interception as you were ever going to see. Really a career-defining play, I think, in a career-defining game for Tony Romo. Romo threw 3 interceptions, and, you know, he's taken a lot of heat through the years because he hasn't had any postseason success. And even though he's put up good stats consistently in the regular season, his critics have said, you know, he's a loser more or less. Can't make winning plays at important times in games. And those people got plenty of ammo tonight because Romo was the story of the game. I guess the story of the game was a play of Alfred Morris, Washington's running back, 33 carries, 200 yards, 3 touchdowns. But, boy, the image of that last interception that Romo threw is still just burned into my mind. I know it wasn't that long ago, only about an hour ago that I saw it, but I could have reached into the TV and strangled Romo at that time, and I know it wasn't the only one who felt that way. But you got to give it to the Washington Redskins. You know, Robert Griffin III didn't have to do much tonight. You could tell he was a little banged up, that knee injury. 9 of 18, only 100 yards passing, no touchdowns, but no interceptions. No turnovers for the rookie Robert Griffin III, no interceptions, no fumbles. He did rush for 63 yards. Tony Romo, once again, 3 interceptions. We mentioned Alfred Morris was the player of the game. A rookie 6th-round pick from Florida Atlantic. Just ran wild. 200 yards on that Cowboys defense. I think there's going to be major changes in Dallas. I mean, I know about a month ago, Jerry Jones said there weren't going to be any changes, whether they made the playoffs or not. But after watching that game tonight, I don't know how you go into next season with Jason Garrett and Tony Romo in Dallas. I mean, that's clearly not a championship combination. They proved it time and time again this season, and it was just driven home tonight to anybody who was a little slow coming around. Obviously, I was one of those who were slow coming around because I thought Dallas was going to win the game tonight. Really liked my chances with the plus 3.5. And by God, we almost got away with one. But again, Romo gave it to him with less than 3 minutes left. But let's move on. Washington did win the NFC East. They will host Seattle this weekend. So tough game for the Redskins. The Seahawks playing as well as anybody in the NFL. They beat the St. Louis Rams today by 7. They didn't cover. First time all season the Seahawks have not covered at home. Still, Seahawks are on a roll coming into this game. So are the Redskins, though. This team was 3-6. They have won 7 straight games. So, going to be a great game. That game is on Sunday. We'll get to the 4 playoff games this coming weekend in a second. I want to talk about a couple of the other games we saw today. What about that Minnesota-Green Bay game? What a great game that was. Huge game for both teams. Minnesota needed the game to make the playoffs. Green Bay needed the game to lock up a first-round bye in the playoffs. Minnesota ended up winning 37-34. Adrian Peterson just took over the game, especially late. Rushed for 199 yards, 9 yards short of Eric Dickerson's record, but if he was disappointed, he sure didn't show it after the game. Peterson's a class guy, and I really believe that the team's success was far and away the most important thing to him. And Minnesota now in the playoffs. They will face Green Bay again next week in Lambeau Field. So the Packers, instead of getting to, prop their feet up on the couch next week and watch some football, they get to play this Vikings team again. But I will say that Green Bay fans, I think, should be a little optimistic because the Packers offense, which has been the reason for their success these last few years and which has struggled throughout this season, they've picked it up a little bit now. 34 points this game. That's their 3rd highest scoring output of the year. A week after they scored 55 against Tennessee, their highest scoring game of the year. So that's 89 points the last 2 weeks for the Green Bay Packers. It's a good sign, I think, because that defense is improved this year. So even though they lost the game, I might feel a little bit better about Green Bay in the playoffs than I did coming into this game. Last week's game against Tennessee I viewed as a little bit of an outlier because the Titans are so bad, but you've seen Green Bay struggle a lot on offense this year, and they really picked it up today against a good Minnesota defense. Picked it up late. Green Bay was scoreless through a quarter and a half, but in the second half, Aaron Rodgers had that offense moving. Wasn't enough, as we said. Minnesota winning 37-34, setting up the rematch next week in Lambeau Field. Another game, a result that really surprised me. We've got to give some credit to the Indianapolis Colts. I know people have given the Colts credit all year. Maybe I haven't given them enough credit. 28-16 win today over the Houston Texans. Didn't really matter for the Colts. They were locked into the 5 seed in the AFC playoffs regardless, but it was a huge game for the Texans. And the Texans are in big trouble now. This was a team that throughout most of the season looked like, if not the best team in the NFL, one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the NFL. But they've now lost 3 out of their last 4, 28-16 loss to the Colts today. If Houston had won this game, they would have locked up home field advantage throughout the playoffs. They would have had a bye next week, obviously. But now that they lost and Denver and New England both won today, the Texans fell all the way from the 1 seed with home field advantage to the 3 seed. They'll be playing next week. They host the Cincinnati Bengals on Saturday. So this was a must-win situation for the Texans. I think they're going to beat Cincinnati at home, but I thought they were going to beat Indianapolis today. I thought they were going to beat Minnesota at home last week. So at this point, I don't know what to think about the Houston Texans. I know this is not the same offense that we saw early in the year. Early in the season, through the first 8, 9, 10 weeks of the year, Houston was a top 5 offense and a top 5 defense statistically. Now, the defense has fallen off. The secondary has been struggling for about a month and a half now. But these struggles on offense are a relatively new thing. Only 16 points today against a bad Indianapolis defense. Only 6 points at home last week against the Minnesota Vikings, who are better than Indianapolis on defense, but Vikings aren't one of the best defenses in the league. And they only scored 14 in that blowout road loss to New England nearly a month ago. So 3 out of their last 4 games, the Houston Texans have been held below 20 points. And Cincinnati, their opponent next week, the Bengals play some good defense. So I'd be very concerned. There's definitely reason for concern if you're a Houston Texans fan. But more about Indianapolis, because this team, 2-14 last year, the worst team in the NFL, chose Andrew Luck number 1 overall. Luck didn't do a whole lot today. As a matter of fact, the Colts only 265 total yards. So it really was the Houston offense, not the Houston defense, that let them down today. But the Colts came out with a win anyway. Deji Kareem with a kickoff return. Chuck Pagano in his return today. He was emotional on the sidelines before the game. Really looked like a great atmosphere in Indianapolis. Almost looked like it had a college feel to the game. Fans going nuts before the game and the beginning of the game. The Colts started the game, drove right down the field for a touchdown. So they had a lot of early momentum. I think, and I know a few people floated this idea out there. I think it's a great idea. Listen, the coach of the Indianapolis Colts, whoever you call that, deserves Coach of the Year. They turned a 2-14 team around into an 11-5 team, a team with a lot of momentum going into the playoffs. I mean, the Colts play in Baltimore next week. I know the Colts haven't been quite as good on the road this year, but Baltimore's looked very vulnerable for the last month. Who's to say the Colts can't win this game? So whoever you call the coach of the Indianapolis Colts this year, I think deserves Coach of the Year, and I think it should be a co-coach of the year. Bruce Arians, Chuck Pagano. Pagano, of course, had been out since September. Arians has really coached the team for most of the year, and what a job he's done, and what a class way he's handled it too. He's just deflected praise every step of the way, calling it Chuck Pagano's team, just without question or without any. And I know most people probably wouldn't go, Chuck Pagano being diagnosed with leukemia. I know a lot of people, I know a lot of people in Bruce Arians' situation wouldn't be vocal and say, well, I should be the coach of this team. But Bruce Arians handled this situation in an extremely classy manner, just faded to the background this week when Pagano came back. And really, throughout this season, when Arians clearly had more to do with their success this year than Pagano. And I know Pagano inspired the team with his fight. But in terms of actual coaching, Arians, you would say, is more responsible for this team than Pagano, but you never know it hearing him talk. I think it would be great if they gave these guys the first ever co-coach of the year. Don't think that's ever been done in NFL history. And no, it's never been done, 2 coaches on the same team. But to me, very deserving, those guys, what they've done with the Indianapolis Colts. And as we said, the Colts carry a lot of momentum into the playoffs. Now, really, this whole season, in my mind, there has not been a clear-cut favorite for the Super Bowl. This hasn't been a season where there's been a dominant team where you pointed out and you said, that is the best team, and everybody else is just trying to beat that team. For a lot of the year, most of the year really, Houston and Atlanta had the two best records in the league, but a lot of people weren't fully buying into those teams. You heard people say San Francisco might be the best team in the league. New England was another name out there. Now, finally, after 17 weeks, we have a clear-cut favorite to win the Super Bowl. A team that there's really no argument. Right now looks like the best team in the NFL. That is the Denver Broncos. A team that's top 5 in the NFL in total offense, total defense. Denver has won 11 in a row, 38-3 today over the Kansas City Chiefs. 13-3 overall. Because the Houston Texans lost, they locked up home field throughout the playoffs. Most impressive thing, Denver's 11-game win streak, all 11 wins have been by 8 points or more. I mean, they haven't even been close to losing a game in a long time, and it's going to be tough for any team. I don't care who you are. And right now, Tom Brady and the New England Patriots are really the only AFC team that I give a fighting chance. But it's going to be tough for the Patriots. It's going to be tough for anybody to go into Denver and beat this team right now. To me, the Broncos, the clear-cut favorites to win the Super Bowl. That doesn't mean they'll win it. I mean, we know that Peyton Manning has had teams before that appeared to be the favorites in the AFC back when he was with Indianapolis, and that didn't always work out for him. But he never had a defense in Indianapolis like he has this year in Denver. I don't recall any Colts defense ever being ranked in the top 5 in yards allowed, scoring defense, passing defense. This Denver defense, the top 5 in all those categories. I mean, they've been dominant this year, just about as good as the offense. I believe Peyton Manning deserves the MVP. I know all about Adrian Peterson. We mentioned 9 yards short of breaking Eric Dickerson's single-season rushing record. And Adrian Peterson, I mean, maybe they should be co-MVPs. I know that has happened before when Steve McNair won it. He might have shared it with Manning that year, or maybe Brett Favre, can't remember. Remember Steve McNair shared it with somebody. I think it was Manning, the year that he was named co-MVP. Adrian Peterson, can't say enough about what he's done. Obviously, Minnesota, the 32nd ranked passing game in the NFL. Peterson carrying them all the way to the playoffs. But how do you not give it to Peyton Manning? The guy has been spectacular, maybe the best season of his career. We mentioned 11 wins in a row now for the Denver Broncos. No team hotter than Denver heading into the playoffs, and it's going to be tough for anybody to go into Mile High Stadium or Invesco Field or whatever they call it now and beat the Broncos in January. So the playoffs are set now. 6 seeds in the AFC, Denver, New England the 2 seed, Houston the 3 seed, Baltimore the 4 seed, Indianapolis, and Cincinnati. In the NFC, we're looking at Atlanta as the 1 seed, San Francisco, those 2 teams have byes this week. Green Bay, by virtue of their loss to Minnesota today, they have to play this weekend. They'll play the Vikings. Washington the 4 seed, Seattle the 5 seed, and Minnesota the 6 seed. So this coming weekend, 2 games on Saturday, 2 games on Sunday. I mean, these next 2 weeks are really maybe the best 2 weeks of NFL football all year because we get multiple games on Saturday and Sunday. You know, once it gets to championship week with AFC and NFC championship games, you know, the sadness is almost set in. The sadness sort of set in that the year is almost over. But not so yet. We have the full playoffs in front of us. On Saturday, we get Cincinnati at Houston. Texans struggling. We mentioned losers of 3 out of the last 4. Cincinnati has been playing very well late this year. They've been playing very well, especially on defense, and that Houston offense hasn't been able to get anything going. So be interested to see what the total is in that game. Because Cincinnati's offense, they haven't been playing well either. The defense has been playing so well, sort of covered for the offense. So I expect a low-scoring game there, and I expect a pretty low total. Around 40 is my guess. Anyway, the other Saturday game, Minnesota at Green Bay. Minnesota beat Green Bay in stirring fashion today. Can they do it again in Lambeau Field? Sitting right here as of now, I have my doubts. Obviously, we'll get more into this as the week goes along. But the Green Bay Packers, they picked it up a little bit offensively over the last couple of weeks. And I still don't think they're the best team in the NFC, but I'm not sure the Vikings are going to be able to beat them twice in a row, especially on the road in Lambeau Field. But I'll tell you what, if there's some inclement weather, because the Vikings run the ball better in Green Bay, no question about that. So if weather becomes a big issue, and Aaron Rodgers isn't able to pass the ball as much as he would like, you never know. That's something you want to keep your eye on, something that might push you towards the Minnesota side of that. Sunday, the 2 games, Indianapolis at Baltimore. We mentioned the Colts rolling 11-5, Baltimore struggling a little bit. Seattle at Washington, the final game on Sunday. I think that's the best game of the weekend. it's hard for me to even think about Washington, to think about that game, because I'm still so bitter about that loss I endured, having Dallas plus 3.5 right there. That interception, Tony Romo. You've got to be kidding me. Romo, there's 3 interceptions. Did I mention a career-defining game for Tony Romo? I believe I did. Not championship material. As you can tell, I haven't quite got over that yet. Maybe need to sleep on it for a night. But Seattle at Washington should be a great game. Redskins have won 7 in a row. Seattle's been playing great themselves. Seattle's been playing as well as any team in the NFL, but the Seahawks have not been the same team on the road this year, even though the last time they left home 50-17 over the Buffalo Bills. But as we saw tonight, the Washington Redskins are not the Buffalo Bills. Is Robert Griffin III 100% healthy? To tell you the truth, he did not look 100% healthy to me tonight. Did not do much, as we mentioned, only 100 yards passing. He'll be facing a different type of defense next week in Seattle. So I don't think Alfred Morris is going to be running for 200 yards on the Seattle defense. So Robert Griffin III is going to need to be healthy. He's going to need to be passing the ball a little bit more than he did tonight. I mean, he did enough tonight, and the fact that he did not turn the ball over, that's the best thing he did tonight. Anyway, should be a great game. Really looking forward to it. Seattle at Washington next Sunday. Of course, we'll get into all those games this week on the site, as we always do. We're going to think of some other things to put up on the site because it's playoff time, and now that we only have 4 game previews to do instead of 16, that gives me more time to put other things up on the site. So we'll see if we can put some interesting things up there for you this week. We do hope you check back as the week goes along. Well, be putting a College Bowl video up here soon. I know that. The week preview video tomorrow. Until then, I guess, for BETDAQ NFL, I'm John Arnette.